My name's Brandon and this is Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on a certain franchise of video games and retrospectively review them. This week we come to a bit of a strange entry. Hi Hi Puffy AmiYumi was a bizarre show that lasted 3 seasons on Cartoon Network from 2004 to 2006. The show centered around the real-life Japanese pop-rock group Puffy AmiYumi and was heavily influenced by anime. This feels like a strange entry into Cartoon Network's video game history because nobody even remembers this show. You'd be forgiven for thinking it was a ratings disaster based on how nobody ever thinks about it anymore, but at the time it was actually a historically popular show with the kids 2 to 11 demographic. When you think about it that way, it then makes perfect sense that Hi Hi Puffy AmiYumi received not 1, but 2 video game adaptations. The entry we're talking about today is the Game Boy Advance's Hi Hi Puffy AmiYumi Kaznapped. It was released in November of 2005 and was developed by Altron, the same people who developed Dexter's Laboratory Robot Rampage. That was one of the best games I've played so far on Cartoon Network video game history, so having Altron on board as developer is a good start. It also seems that the game was a critical success. In fact, Kaznapped is the most critically praised Cartoon Network game of all time, sitting on a 71 Metacritic score. This isn't exactly a massive achievement considering how lowly all the other games are rated, but an average score of 71 is nothing to be ashamed of. Without me having any real attachment or strong memories of the franchise, let's jump in and see what Hi Hi Puffy AmiYumi Kaznapped is all about. You're probably wondering how a video game developer would adapt a show about a Japanese pop rock band into a video game, right? Well, the platformer safety net is here to save the day once again. Kaznapped, like roughly 99% of all animated licensed games, is a platformer. Like many of the other Cartoon Network shows that featured multiple main characters and received games, Kaznapped allows you to switch between both Ami and Yumi. Each character is unique here, and using both of their defining character abilities is essential to completing the game. To boil it down to its simplest, Yumi is the muscle, and Ami is the nimble and agile one. Yumi will move huge blocks out of the way and smash rocks with her guitar, while Ami has a triple jump and can use a grappling hook to traverse levels. You also have a special jam session attack that can be accessed when you fill up your meter. Once unleashed, this move wipes the entire screen of enemies and is extremely handy when you find yourself in a do or die situation, or just can't be bothered dealing with a bunch of enemies. Leaning on one character is not something that happens often throughout this game. While there are specific levels at the beginning that are clearly designed for you to use one character primarily, these exist purely for you to become familiar with their abilities in a timely manner. Later levels all require frequent switching between the pair to solve puzzles and make it to the end in time. The puzzles here actually feel very rewarding. They aren't very challenging, but they provide just enough resistance to keep the game from being a pushover. To me, it felt like Altron hit the sweet spot here, as the puzzles required some thought, but also didn't slow you down so much that it completely halted the fluidity and speed of platforming. The platforming here is quite straightforward, and there are a lot of aids for the player. This can particularly be seen in the skull icons that point out bottomless pits for you. Kaznapped is clearly aimed at the young 2 to 11 age demographic that the show targeted, which explains the inclusion of such a feature. It also becomes obvious that this is aimed at young players when taking into account how long each level is. You have musical notes you can collect in each level which act basically the same as coins in Mario, but unless you're trying to be meticulous and get all of them, levels are over in a flash. There's no serious incentive to get these musical notes either, so the majority of players would no doubt just zoom through the game. It actually always felt like the levels were ending abruptly. I'd be going along, enjoying myself and feeling like there was a decent chunk of level left, but most of the time I'd come to the goal in the next 30 seconds and realise the other parts of the level I thought I was going to be taken to were actually just optional and for grabbing the musical notes. To break up the platforming gameplay, Altron included a shoot 'em up section as you transition from one world to the next. It's interesting that the shoot 'em up genre has seen so much representation in Cartoon Network games so far, as it's not an extremely common genre. I didn't mind these stages, but just like the platforming, it's clearly aimed at a very young audience. The combat here is pretty easy in general, and the end of level boss battles are made incredibly easy by the special attack you're given. You get 3 of these attacks, and each time it does a serious chunk of damage, but to make things even easier, this attack refills when you die. If you go into the boss battle with at least 2 lives, you can just use your 3 attacks, die, use your 3 attacks again, and then you're done with the boss battle in about a minute. I understand they tried to keep the difficulty low for younger players, but this doesn't feel like it would even offer kids much of a challenge. The later shoot 'em up levels don't even get harder, they just get longer, which is tedious and overall makes the game less enjoyable. Kaznapped really is baby's first platformer, right down to including obligatory water and ice levels to showcase to kids. However, one thing the game nails 100% is the charm and feel of the show. The soundtrack, while pretty simple, is catchy and maintains the heart of the show. Music is the biggest part of Hi Hi Puffy AmiYumi, so it was a must for Altron to nail this aspect. Similarly, there's a fair amount of character present in both Ami and Yumi here. Something as simple as Yumi pulling herself up onto higher ledges by her guitar goes a long way in making the game feel less like a generic platformer, and more like one based on an incredibly unique cartoon. As for the game's story, it's not really much, as is the case with most platformers in general. Your manager, Kaz, is kidnapped by a superfan named Harmony. That's really the entire extent of the story. Once you complete the game, you unlock higher difficulty settings, which apparently give you different endings. I didn't test this out though, because I really didn't want to play through the entire game over again just for an ending.
I can't work like this. These headphones are useless. I can't hear a thing. Gomenasai?
Hi Hi Puffy AmiYumi Kaznapped definitely earns its place as the highest rated Cartoon Network game. It's a competently made game and arguably is the least flawed of all the games I've reviewed so far. Its biggest downfall comes from how focused they were on their target demographic. It makes sense that you'd try and scale the difficulty so younger kids would be able to enjoy it, but I think they went a little overboard and made it a bit too easy even for kids. They included difficulty levels, but you can only unlock these after completing the entire game. Ideally, I would have liked to have seen these unlocked from the start. In my opinion, Altron have made a very fine puzzle platformer for people new to gaming, but anybody with more than a handful of experience with these types of games will find things a little too easy. Having said that, I still believe Hi Hi Puffy AmiYumi Kaznapped is a very fine game overall.